Was all nu metal terrible? No. Some of it was awful and aged like milk, but some of it was great and still holds up.
So this video is going to look at some of the best contributions the nu metal era gave us. It wasn't all cringe and toxic attitudes. There were some great albums in this subgenre.
Rules for the list: one band per entry to add some variety, which does make it a bit difficult, but I had to narrow it down somehow. Also, this list is going in chronological order of release dates, so it's not ranked by which is the best. Finally, I'm capping the time frame from 95 to 2005 just to help narrow down the choices a little bit more, and also because that really is the big peak time of nu metal. Also, I'm obviously aware there are more than 10 great nu metal albums. Just because your favorite is not on this list does not make it bad. Leave a comment and let people know what you think is a great nu metal album. Finally, I love Rage Against the Machine, but they are not on this list because 1, most people don't see them as nu metal, including me, and 2, they started before the nu metal era. Their music kind of transcends nu metal and it's not the same. So as much as I love Rage, they are not on this list. For those of you that still stayed around after that statement, you know how these videos work. Let's get to it.
What Wayne Static created at the end of the 20th century turned heads at both the wild sounds and impressive rhythms. Wisconsin Death Trip by Static X, I feel, is the perfect example of a nu metal album from a band who did not become a household name. Adding electronic chaos with some great effects to the instruments, Wayne Static growled and screamed all over a debut album that still stands out.
The original Static X lineup with Wisconsin Death Trip, which now has the other 3 members minus Wayne in the reformed Static X, which is out now, really had a unique presentation in their sound. Where some nu metal bands were wanting to bring in DJs and adding more hip-hop, Wayne Static turned that on its head and screamed non-stop over quick rhythms and amazing sounds that aren't typical rock. This was a shock to the system for the FM rock stations back in '99, but songs like Push It were in countless movie soundtracks, and Wisconsin Death Trip pushed several singles and the album went platinum. I stand by this is Static X's best release and also is in a weird world of its own compared to other nu metal albums at that time. I also stand by that Wayne's hair was 100% a contributing factor to the band's appeal.
Now this is what it's like when worlds collide.
Another album that was big in the late 90s and early 2000s that got attention for having something different was Powerman 5000's Tonight the Stars Revolt. Led by Rob Zombie's younger brother Spider-One, this album was another upbeat, energetic, hard rock, groove-filled shout-along. Not only was it a good example of how nu metal could be fun, but also incorporated different speeds and energy throughout.
This was a nu metal band that got good MTV attention that was not Korn or Limp Bizkit, which is saying something considering how much was going on with MTV and music getting attention at that time. When Worlds Collide was a massive song back in '99, and it gave the band a massive shelf life in movies and video games, including the legendary Tony Hawk Pro Skater 2 and WWE SmackDown vs. Raw. Catchy riffs and hooks galore. Lyric writing was simple, but the performance was so theatrical and powerful that everything sunk in. Over-the-top energy with that nu metal in-your-face attitude about nothing. Powerman 5000 had that in a way that doesn't feel dated or awkward when you listen back. Several singles, album went platinum, all with that edgy spaceman gimmick. What's not to love?
In 1999, we would be introduced to a powerhouse vocalist and great heavy band in Sevendust with their second album, Home. It was after their Woodstock 99 performance that people really started paying attention, and songs like Denial and Waffle got solid airplay. Home would be certified gold in the US and ignited a 25-plus year career for a band.
Sevendust is a group that did ebb away from the nu metal sound of the early 2000s over time, but the lineup has gone almost untouched since Home was released, and it was Home that made LaJean Witherspoon such a force in heavy music. His performance and so many songs on Home, along with Clinton Morgan coming in to sing as well, helped Sevendust stand out a bit more in a sea of nu metal bands. Home is another album from '99 that definitely dates this style of music in a good way. You can listen to this and not look back awkwardly like at the high school yearbooks you have. This was heavy nu metal vibes, and that wasn't just chugga chugga in them either. Sevendust offered different speeds, huge intensity at the right moments, LaJean proved himself, and this album made lifetime fans from a good group of people. Also worth pointing out, Sevendust has good guys in it. Not everyone in the music business is awful.
In the summer of 2000, we saw Deftones step up above and beyond what I think many would have given credit at the time. White Pony stood out as a completely different entity in nu metal with wildly different songs, from Change in the House of Flies to Digital Bath and Knife Party and the Grammy-winning Elites. In 2000 and 2001, every time you heard Deftones on the air, it had a different feeling and it was always exciting.
I made an entire video talking about White Pony as it's one of my all-time favorite albums, and as time has gone on, I find myself going to this album as so many songs don't age from it. Deftones had that ability to make music on their own terms and with their own sound that wasn't reliant on trend chasing. If anything, they were the trend. Chino, Steph, everyone involved felt heard and contributed something captivating. White Pony is wild at times, but also massively creative and never chaotic. Frank had an amazing atmosphere building skill that applied perfectly to this album, and even though Deftones sang about some dark stuff on this album, seriously, the subject matter for some of these songs is rough. It's worth hearing in full, and by that I mean the original White Pony, which did not include the Back to School remake. That one does not exist in my mind.
That same summer in 2000, we got an album incredibly heavy and scared just about every mother of a teenager in America. Mudvayne kicked the door off its hinges with LD50, and everyone's collective jaws dropped at just the first minute of Dig. What many people who bought LD50 found out, however, that Mudvayne had something sinister and fierce with their debut that still gets cherished today.
Mudvayne went much deeper than just anger with some amazing bass, and was also extremely technical and went deep into storytelling at a time where complex playing and progressive tracks were not the big sellers. It's another introduction to an amazing frontman with Chad Gray. It added another big band for roughly a decade in heavy music, and it inspired some wild haircuts for high schoolers. Joking aside, LD50 is something on paper that absolutely is a result of the time period, and many people would have expected to age poorly, but there are many crushing hidden gems on this album that it's unfair to Mudvayne, LD50, and it's just such an experience that grabs your attention, and the skill involved in the playing, it's just unquestioned. Even after later Mudvayne albums, I still say LD50 is the most interesting from their discography.
Where Slipknot's self-titled album was a shock, Slipknot's Iowa was a lightning bolt that proved the Masked Men were not just insane musicians crammed together on stage. Arguably the greatest thing to ever have the name Iowa associated with it, this album from 2001 dialed up the ferocity while teaching us that Slipknot was going to be a standout going forward and teaching us the greatest equation of all time.
This was a tough pick for which Slipknot album, but I chose Iowa because it amplified what the self-titled delivered. The music running through Iowa, the guitar work, the mountain of percussion, it all shows how Slipknot were able to climb that mountain, stay there for so long. It's a gargantuan effort. Slipknot made an album different from the self-titled while delivering so much of what the maggots wanted. The lyrics are grotesque at points. This is an undeniable fact, but it also serves the purpose in anger. Iowa is not just trying to sound tough, which was a big part of other nu metal styles back in the day. This is the heaviest Slipknot album in my opinion, and shows the darkest side of the group, which also came at the best possible time when Slipknot could reinforce that they would be sticking around 20 years later, and they still are.
1 week after Iowa was released, we got Toxicity. That's how big of a boom nu metal had with good material. System of a Down dialed everything up on their second album Toxicity, and songs like Chop Suey became a permanent part of pop culture. As politically charged as it was wild, this album sounds like a world of chaos at first listen, but after you sit with it, you realize just how much of a masterpiece System of a Down created.
Toxicity was a big deal when it came out for many reasons, but it also stands out as a huge, enormous nu metal style album that achieved the big top 40 radio success with singles, while having tons of material on Toxicity that had people talking. The album went to #1 on Billboard 200 chart and went multiple times platinum. Again, System of a Down became a big part of music history, all while boomers were terrified of music like this. The trade-offs between Serge and Darren, the fantastic instrumentation, it all still feels fresh. System has that rare feat of being a huge selling band without a bad album, and even though we haven't gotten a new album in a long time, Toxicity is still something that makes you happy to go back to. Not just nu metal fans either, but music fans in general have fond memories of Toxicity and everything it meant to them.
Another difficult choice to which Korn album to choose is some have aged much better than others, but when it came down to it, I feel Untouchables not only aged the best, but is Korn's proof they could grow up while still making their unique sound. Korn is a true pioneer of nu metal, and Untouchables is the album where Korn refined and perfected their craft with the help of a lot of money.
Over $3 million in fact, but Korn made it back and then some with a Grammy win and Untouchables going platinum. Jonathan Davis said years ago that this was his favorite Korn album, which is saying something with how prolific Korn is. And when I say how Korn refined their craft, keep in mind this was 7 or 8 years after Korn's bombastic debut, and they matured in a good way from that period. From the opening of Here to Stay and all through the track time, Korn have come a long way from a song like All in the Family. The bass from Fieldy is as thick as ever, the guitars get creative and wild, you hear Davis giving it his all. This is a great Korn album without having to give a disclaimer on a track not to listen to because it didn't age well. There is the issue of the album cover though. That's not the nicest to look at. Still stand by, Untouchables works great.
If you were even remotely aware of new music in 2003, you were aware that Evanescence was the next big thing and flooded in a new movement of women being in the front of rock, and that includes nu metal. Fallen was a phenomenon long before songs became memes, and Amy Lee was an inspiration as well as a driving force in heavy music with her singing her goth heart out to nu metal riffs in a trend-setting debut.
From the nu metal style of Going Under to the Ballad of My Immortal, Fallen is a big part of many people's children's and adult lives. It's also a nu metal album that launched a household name of a band due to the creativity and talent. Amy Lee presented something different with her style, and it arrived at the perfect time, and to this day, it's still the greatest thing Evanescence and Amy Lee have done. There are many better songs on Fallen than Bring Me to Life, and it's a shame that some music fans only really attribute Wake Me Up Inside to Evanescence's name. Fallen has a lot to get caught up in. 7 times platinum in the US, many millions more sold around the world, and many hidden gems on this album like Tourniquet. There's a reason people keep wanting to hear Amy Lee even to this day, and it's because of what Evanescence did in 2003.
There would be no nu metal movement without Linkin Park. That I think everyone can agree with. But when I must pick one album from the group, it's not the earth-shattering debut Hybrid Theory, it's the follow-up Meteora, where Chester, Mike, and everyone shine their brightest. Meteora proved that Hybrid Theory wasn't a fluke and that Linkin Park was going to be a massive band for years.
I know many will argue which Linkin Park album is better, but I feel Meteora has nothing you could ever want to skip at all or even get sick of. The work from Johan was untouchable on this album, and every song is a statement. That's why Meteora has so much going for it as a complete album, not just singles. On top of that, Meteora has aged as gracefully as any nu metal album could ever hope for. The big hits people remember, Somewhere I Belong, Numb, amazing songs like Lying From You, Breaking the Hab, and Faint. You could just list off the whole track list. The reason that Meteora had such a long shelf life in stores as a bestseller is because it kept drawing new people in over the course of 2 years who just hadn't given Linkin Park a chance up until that point. And it's the perfect example of nu metal worth hearing. And that was a look at 10 great nu metal albums. Know of another great nu metal album? Leave a comment, let everyone know. Big thanks to my patrons and a special thanks to Chris Doman and Dom Noble. You can have a say in upcoming videos, get weekly new music playlists, and see videos early by supporting Rocked on Patreon. Please click the link in the video description for information on helping the channel. Please subscribe and ring the bell to get notified on upcoming videos, and you can keep up to date with Rocked on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. This video is dedicated to the many people over the years who have hate-watched me thinking I hate all nu metal. It's like you never thought once I grew up with the same music and had favorites also. Just because I don't like one nu metal band doesn't mean I hate everything nu metal.